Hi, everybody. Welcome to our workshop for Hybrid Auth. My name is Volkan, and I'm the tech lead at Royal Cyber. I'm going to be walking you through this workshop. So today, for the content that we're going to cover, we're going to start off with what is hybrid auth in a phased rollout? How is it replacing the SLAS cartridge that we used to use before? Then we're going to talk a little bit about PIG instances and SIG instances. How do we use the ECDN provided by Salesforce, and which instance is it available on, and what do we do if it's not available on the instances that we want to have our demos on? And then finally, I'm going to walk you through some basic steps that we can use to configure hybrid auth, and I'll show you a running example that I've set up. So starting off, what is hybrid auth and what is a phased rollout? So a phased rollout, a lot of you might be familiar with the concept of a phased rollout, where we're routing some of our routes to MRT, and we're routing some of our routes to, and MRT refers to your PWA kit, and the rest of your routes are going to whatever legacy architecture you could be using, like SiteGenesis, or it could be SFRA. So you could have a phased rollout or a hybrid rollout where you have some routes going to one site and the others going to the other one. So generally, the model that is followed is that you have most of your routes going to PWA Kit, and you've got some going to SFRA. So the traffic is split either by the MRT rules that we configure in MRT for lower instances, or then it's handled by ECDN on the PIG instances. And the shopper basically is maintaining a single session. This is where hybrid auth comes into play, where now we're not using any token juggling to ensure that the session is bridged. We're using cookies instead, and we're using the native SFCC session cookie, which is the DWS ID now, and basically sharing it between the sessions. So it's a lot simpler, it's a lot faster to set up. We don't have that additional cartridge anymore. And a lot of the API calls can be handled behind the scenes using the session and making hybrid deployments a lot more clear and smooth. So what is the difference between SLAS to hybrid? What is the transition that we're going to notice over here? So in SLAS, basically what we were using is that we had tokens, which would basically be read by our cartridge on the SFRA SiteGenesis side to be able to understand what session is going on or to create that session. And you'd have a completely headless PWA kit, which was communicating via SLAS tokens, which is still happening, but we're not doing this for session bridging at least anymore. So for session bridging, we're going to use a singular DWS ID cookie, which is what the SFCC side uses to detect a web session. And we're going to share that between the two different architectures. And from SFCC's perspective, it sees a single domain and it sees one web session cookie that's being used. So for SFCC, it's no longer an illusion, it's actually a singular session that is being maintained. Whereas with the SLAS cartridge, we created that illusion of one singular session. However, we were maintaining the model for two different sessions at that time. So this used to create a bit of a complexity, and there were some scenarios where you would feel that there was, there were issues like the empty cart coming up or something like that, because that bridging in itself wasn't true bridging. It was more of, again, the illusion of a bridge. So now with hybrid, however, we are skipping the token auth and we're just using the SFCC native session cookie, and we're creating a single session from the SFCC's perspective. SLAS, please don't confuse this with SLAS being deprecated or something. SLAS is still being used, so your SLAS token is definitely still going to be used because you have a headless structure. So your headless storefront is still going to communicate with your SFCC server side using the SLAS OAuth 2 tokens, but it's just not going to be using it for session bridging anymore. So these are the cookies that I was referring to. Now we're using cookies and hybrid auth to bridge the session, and you'll notice that these cookies are going to exist on your client side. Your DWS ID, again, it's your web session cookie that's generated by SFCC to identify what session is going on the storefront. You've got the token, the SLAS access token, which is still, again, going to be used for your shopper APIs. Then you've got CCNX or CCNXG. This is basically the refresh token. So whenever you generate an OAuth2 token, you'll notice that there's a refresh token that is also generated. And this refresh token is generally a lot longer lived than the access token. So what it does is that when the access token gets stale, then the refresh token regenerates it again. And you get the fresh access token again, which you can use to make Shopper API calls. Then you've got your CCAT. This is basically when you're transitioning from SFRA or SiteGenesis to your PWA kit. It's a handoff of that CCAT token, and it's quite a large token, which is stored as a cookie, and it is immediately deleted or replaced by your refresh token. Once it's been stored to your local storage, it's been updated over there. It's normally removed from your cookies so that it's not included in all of your requests, and you don't get you don't exceed your cookie limit. Then you've got DW Anonymous and DW Customer. So your DW Anonymous is for your guest users and your DW Customer is for your logged in users. So moving on to your PIG versus your SIG instances and setting up ECDN. So you might be familiar, if you've been using the SFCC realm, you'll be familiar with the idea of the PIG instances and the SIG instances. Before this might not have been a big deal. Like, a lot of things were pretty much the same on sandboxes as they were on the PIG instances. But when it comes to hybrid auth, what we notice is that the ECDN is only enabled for your PIG instances. So your PIG instance is your primary instance group. This behaves a little differently than your secondary instance group, which is generally like your sandboxes, the ones that we use for normal development. And your PIG instance group contains your three main environments, which is your development, staging, and production. So for your PIG instances, Salesforce provides you an ECDN, which acts as a reverse proxy, and this is what is basically handling the routing of your, whatever you want to route to MRT and SFRA or SiteGenesis. For your phased rollout, that is, all those rules are going to live on your edge or your ECDN rules. For your secondary instance group, so you don't actually have the ECDN available for your secondary instance group. However, you can use the MRT and the plugin redirect and a node proxy that Salesforce introduced in its POC, which you can use to mimic the behavior of the ECDN and get it to work the same way on your sandbox. Normally, because when clients are going live for the first time, what they normally opt for is getting a test run. Since the SIG, although you can mimic the ECDN behavior, but if you actually want to see the actual ECDN behavior in play and you don't want to disrupt the rest of your, whatever processes you have going on for your SFRA or SiteGenesis that are already live, you can opt for getting a test realm, which is going to basically give you the instances again for production, staging, and development. And you can actually go through the entire cycle of development on that PIG instance and actually use your ECDN as well. So this is something that clients generally opt for when they're moving to Composable, just so that they can get an idea of how it's working on those test realm environments. So basically, the PIG is where the ECDN decides where to route all of your traffic, and your SIG where MRT places your mini edge. So you can mimic the ECDN behavior on your SIG or your lower instances. You have some things that you need to set up. This is like some things that you have. For example, you can set the environment variables in your PWA Kit side. You can do this on MRT directly using environment variables. And basically, you can allow cookies on MRT. This is going to allow you to exchange cookies between, and then you're going to update there's some code changes. Again, I've included this in my guide if you're not able to follow alongside, because I've actually already set up my code, but I will be sharing a guide that you can follow where I've covered all of the code changes that you need. I'm going to attach the files that you need to attach on your PWA Kit side. I'll link the redirect URL cartridge as well, so you can install that and run it basically on your sandbox. As far as the configurations are concerned, I'm going to walk you through the configurations, what we need to configure on what side so that you're good to go. So whenever you implement it the first time, you might run into some issues. These are some issues that I ran into as well. So there were some 404 messages on PWA Kit sometimes because you might be redirecting it to the wrong site or locale. You might have loops. You might get stuck in a loop because you haven't really configured the rules, the MRT rules to match what you have on your redirect cartridge, and then it might kind of, you start ping-ponging and you have requests going to PWA Kit, and PWA Kit tells you to send it back to SFRA or SiteGenesis, or then in case you lost your session, you didn't have a cart that was persisting, that could possibly be because you did not allow cookies on your MRT. As for ECDN on the PIG instance, so there are a couple of steps that you're going to have to follow whenever you set up the ECDN. The prerequisites for this is that your API client that you're going to create on your account manager, it should include the scope of SFCC CDN zones.rw. You're going to identify your ECDN zone ID, and then you can get this using the get zones info from the CDN zones API. You need to ensure that your zone has a certificate that covers your production host name. Besides this, you need to enable always use HTTPS for the zone. This is also something that can be used using done using the zones API. If MRT is IP restricted, then you allow Cloudflare ECDN IPs. Create MRT routing rules. So this is the same rules that we're going to configure in our MRT. You're going to have to do that for the CDN, so on using the CDN zones API. Okay, so moving on to, let's get started with our demo. I'm going to pull out the guide that I created as well. So for the step-by-step guide, basically, if you need to have an instance, like this is my instance, you need to have an SIG instance, you need to have access to PWA Kit, you need to set up your project for PWA Kit, you need to have access to manage runtime, you need the plugin redirect cartridge installed in SFCC. So once you've got that running, these are some code changes and some basically some commands that you're going to run to emulate your proxy. So we're going to use this node proxy that SFCC has provided, which is basically this one. All you need to do is run this command on your CLI. And then you've got these two helpers. So these two helper util files that I'll drop with this guide, and then you can basically add them to your utils file. So this is where the path is going to be. Then you're going to create a .env file in your root folder. You're going to include your SFCC client ID, which is going to be your private client ID, which you're going to generate using your SLAS admin UI. Whatever your SFCC organization ID is, your short code, your site ID, which in my case, I'm going to use refarc. And then these are just some things that you need to set up in your environment rules. And then this is your MRT rules where you've got the redirects. And you can see over here that I've added all of the paths that I need redirected to PWA Kit. So you can change this accordingly. I've omitted the cart and the checkout from this list because I don't want those to be routed to PWA Kit. Similarly, if you have something like that, you're just gonna, modify it to exclude it or to include a path that you want to have configured to go to PWA Kit. So next, you're gonna update the package.json to include this command for start, and then you're going to include your .env in your packages so that it gets installed whenever you run npm install. You use your .env generally to use it on localhost. So you're going to use your .env file configurations to localhost. For SSR, you can include this right under your imports. And Then there are some code changes that you're going to have to do in MRT. So this is one line that you're going to add to your SSR.js somewhere at the top. And then you're going to look for local allow cookies or wherever you have this constant options. And the port is declared right under that you can allow cookies so that you can transfer them between your local host. And within your create handler, you're going to enable it to use the hybrid proxy that we included in the utils file up previously. And then you're going to enable your hybrid to true. You're going to include this proxy configuration inside your default.js config file, and it's going to be your DWRE static. This is for you're going to update your host, and we're also going to update this on MRT as well. Then for your routes.jsx, you can notice that have this list for drop routes, and I'm not routing these. So for the cart checkout, I've added them to my list for drop routes. And then I have a little bit of logic that basically says that everything except for the drop routes needs to be routed to PWA Kit. And then we've got this catch-all component that we're going to set up, which is basically going to build our URL the way that SFRA understands it, and it can redirect it to the respective path. So this basically includes having the /s or having the site ID set properly or the locale set up properly. And that's it. That's all you need to do for the code changes on PWA Kit side. As for your SFRA or SiteGenesis side, so we have for SFRA, we've got this redirect cartridge, plugin redirect. So if you go to your Salesforce Commerce Cloud, you can basically have this plugin redirect. So you're going to install this cartridge. You're going to take the metadata. You're going to import the metadata, which is basically some system object type extensions, and these are custom preferences. You're going to import these into your sandbox. Then let's actually move forward to the sandbox itself and walk over the configurations that we have to do over here. Okay, so this is our sandbox. The first thing I'm going to do is select my site, and then I'm going to enable hybrid auth. So this is the page for hybrid auth. I'm going to set up my client ID and my client secret over here. And then I'm going to enable hybrid auth in my settings over here. So that's step 1. And then for step 2, you're going to go to your administration, global preferences, security. Okay, so in security and access restriction, you're going to make sure that your enforce HTTPS is enabled. This is going to ensure that your cookies are transferred properly. So that's another step that you need to do. Let's refer back to see. All right, so that's it for actually enabling it. Then we're going to basically import the cartridge, which I've already done and included in the path. So you can see over here that I have the plugin redirect in my cartridge path for RefArch. And then if we go back to our merchant tools and look at custom preferences, we see a group over here called, it's going to be called MRT PWA Kit Hybrid Plugin. So this is basically related to the cartridge for the redirect cartridge. So plugin redirect. Over here, you can see that this toggle home redirect enables redirecting of the home page to PWA Kit, product pages to PWA Kit. So this is basically where you're going to enable those routes, right? So the interface is a little different than the MRT rules itself, where you've got this configured already, and you just need to choose a yes or a no. You can see that I've redirected everything to my PWA Kit except for my cart and my checkout. A very important thing to note over here is that you need to ensure that your MRT rules and the configuration that you have in your redirect plugin match. So you're not going to use something different over there and have a different configuration here, because you're just going to end up with a ping pong scenario where you're going to be stuck throwing requests from PWA Kit to SFRA and back. Then you've got the setup as well. Again, this is only for the routes that I want taken to PWA Kit. This also needs to be in line with whatever I have set up in my MRT rules. So again, you need to make sure that your routes are very clear and they're consistent between what you've set up in your MRT rules and what you've set up over here. So once we're done with this is the business manager configurations that are required. You need to make sure that's in your cartridge path. You need to make sure it's before your base cartridge on the left. If you have additional cartridges, you just want to make sure that it's in the right order, that whatever controllers that we are enhancing are not being overridden, so your changes need to be reflecting. That's it for the business manager configurations. Now we're going to move on to our MRT on manage runtime. So over here, this is my project. And if you've been following before, you would know how to deploy a bundle over here. Again, you need to go over here to your account settings. You need to generate an API key and set this for your Mobify and your Mobify file on your machine. And then you're going to update your project ID, which in my case is this one. So I'm going to make sure that this is updated in my package.json. So I've got it configured in the name over here. And okay. And then we're going to go to the environments. We're going to go to production, which is basically where I'm deploying my code. And we're going to set up your environment variables. So for your environment variables, you need to make sure that you have this hybrid enabled is going to be true. Your MRT rules is going to be pretty much the same thing that you've put in your .env file. I've shared the sample as well. And then your SFCC origin is basically going to be the URL of your sandbox. Then your client secret, your client ID for your private client, your SFCC organization ID, your shortcode site ID, and also for your, actually, I should have mentioned this before. So for your SLAS admin UI, you need to make sure that you have the scope configured for your hybrid auth. This is your SLAS admin UI. I'm going to open my private client for this one. So this is my private client. I'm going to edit it. And I need to make sure I have session bridge, this one. Need to include it. So we need to have this in our SLAS admin UI for your client ID. You need to have, all right. So you need to make sure you have the scope configured. You need to make sure you have all of your environment variables configured. And then in your environment settings, you're going to basically, if I edit this, you can see that I've also added this DWRE static over here like we did in our config file. So you need to include it over here. It's basically just going to be DWRE static. It's going to be HTTPS, and then you're going to include your path over here. So I just removed it by mistake. You can pick it up from here. We've got DWRE static. And we have the same path. I do have this though. Okay, so this is it for DWRE static, and you need to make sure that your cookies are enabled from here. This ensures that your cookies are being transferred. And that's it. I think that we're good. Once you deploy your bundle, after you've made all of the changes listed over here, you've got your environment variables declared, you can deploy your bundle. I already have my bundle deployed, so I'm gonna visit my site. Hope I have the right one deployed. Okay, so you can see that my session is bridged. Let me try to add something in my cart. There we go. So your session is successfully bridged. You can see that my cart is redirecting. It's pretty fast. Compared to like the SLAS, I feel like there is a difference in speed as well when we're using hybrid auth. So that's it for our session bridging. Thank you for joining the session. I hope that you guys learned how to set this up, and you can do this on your sandboxes as well. Just make sure that you're following the guide, that you've updated the right files. And yeah, thank you for joining the session.